In the vast and dramatic world of Greek mythology, few figures generate as much fascination and controversy as Medea, a queen whose story is both a hymn to overwhelming love and a scream of vengeance that has echoed through the centuries. Her name evokes images of betrayal, passion, and death, but also of intelligence, power, and an emotional force so intense that even the gods trembled before her fury. Medea was not just a wounded woman. She was a sorceress, a warrior, a mother, and a murderer. Born in the distant land of Colchis, present-day Georgia, Medea was the daughter of King Aeetes and the granddaughter of Helios, the sun god. Raised amidst magic and mystery, she showed supernatural abilities from a young age, being one of the few capable of mastering the dark arts of witchcraft and alchemy. But it was her encounter with Jason, leader of the Argonauts, that would forever change the course of her life, and that of many others. Jason arrived in Colchis in search of the Golden Fleece, a legendary object said to grant divine power to its possessor. To obtain it, he had to complete a series of impossible tasks set by Medea's father, King Aeetes. That was when Aphrodite, under Hera's orders, made Medea fall deeply in love with Jason. Moved by a passionate and blind love, she decided to help him overcome the deadly challenges, taming fire-breathing bulls, sowing dragon's teeth, and defeating warriors that sprang from the earth. All of this was possible thanks to her magical knowledge and boundless courage. But after obtaining the Golden Fleece, Jason and Medea could not remain in Colchis. Pursued by King Aeetes, they fled together, taking Medea's brother Absyrtus with them. In a calculated act of cruelty, Medea killed her own brother during the escape and dismembered his body to delay her father, who was forced to stop and collect the remains of his son. This episode already hints at Medea's extreme character, capable of anything for love and for survival. After years of exile and shared adventures, Jason and Medea arrived in Corinth, where they built a life together and had children. It seemed as though everything had been worth it. They had left behind kingdoms, deaths, and curses for a new beginning. However, fate still held a dark twist that would turn Medea into one of the most unforgettable characters in ancient literature. Years after settling in Corinth, Jason made an unforgivable mistake. He decided to abandon Medea to marry Glauce, the daughter of King Creon. This wasn't just a romantic decision, but a political move. Jason sought stability and power, believing this new marriage would elevate his social standing. But he completely underestimated the woman he had loved, protected, and betrayed. When Medea learned the news, her sorrow quickly turned into rage. The betrayal was not only personal, it left her vulnerable. As a foreigner in a strange land, without family or legal protection, she was exposed to complete abandonment. And worst of all, her children, born of a love that had once burned so brightly, would be left just as unprotected. Here begins the darkest chapter of her story. Medea did not respond with tears or pleas, but with a meticulous and terrible plan. She decided to punish everyone involved. Jason, of course, for his infidelity and ambition, Glauce for accepting the role of rival, and King Creon for permitting the marriage and ordering Medea's exile. But the most shocking part, and the one that has sparked moral debate for centuries, was her final decision to kill her own children. Why did she do it? The answers vary depending on interpretation. Some claim it was pure vengeance against Jason, to make him feel the same pain she felt. Others argue it was a necessary sacrifice to prevent her children from being mistreated or humiliated for being the offspring of a cursed foreign woman. Still others see it as a way to free them from future suffering, even if through death. What is certain is that Medea prepared a deadly gift for Glauce, a poisoned dress and crown. When the princess put them on, Both she and her father Creon died. He perished trying to save her. Then, in a moment of profound internal agony, Medea made the most atrocious decision. She killed her 2 young children with her own hands. There was no redemption, no public remorse. Only a mother who, in her desperation, chose to take her children to the afterlife rather than leave them in the hands of those who would see them as bastards or traitors. After the crime, she appeared before Jason riding a chariot pulled by winged serpents, a gift from her grandfather Helios, fleeing earthly justice while showing him the lifeless bodies of their children. The message was clear. No one can betray Medea and go unpunished. This story, originally told by Euripides in his tragedy Medea, 431 BC, still sends chills today. It is a complex work, full of nuance, exploring themes such as the role of women in ancient society, the madness of love, violence as a response to injustice, and the duality between motherhood and vengeance. Medea's story doesn't end with the murder of her children. Rather, that act marks a turning point that has inspired centuries of interpretations, debates, and reimaginings. Her figure, as dark as it is powerful, has become a kind of cultural mirror. What each era sees in Medea says as much about her as it does about the society observing her. Over the centuries, her legacy has transcended Greek tragedy to become a symbol of resistance, madness, rebellious femininity, distorted motherhood, and even the fight against patriarchal oppression. In ancient Greece, Euripides gave her the most powerful voice, but he wasn't the only one to write about her. Other poets and playwrights, such as Seneca in Rome, also explored her psyche, though with different nuances. While Euripides presents a deeply human Medea, with complex emotions and understandable, though extreme, motivations, Seneca portrays her as a figure closer to pure evil, almost demonic. This duality in her portrayal shows how her character can be read from multiple perspectives: victim, villain, heroine, or something in between. One of the most fascinating aspects of Medea's story is her struggle against patriarchy. In a society where women were considered second-class citizens, with no political voice or real autonomy, Medea stands as an unstoppable force. She not only defies the men who betray her, but takes control of her fate, using intelligence, magic, and violence as tools of power. She doesn't beg, she doesn't plead, she acts. And that attitude, while morally questionable, makes her an archetype of the woman who refuses to be broken by rules imposed by others. This reading has gained special relevance in modern feminism, where Medea has been reinterpreted as a martyr of female oppression. Writers and thinkers such as Krista Wolf, in her novel Medea, Voices 1983, have sought to humanize her even more, presenting her story from her own perspective. In this version, Medea is not just a murderous mother, but a woman crushed by an unjust system that denies her rights, protection, and dignity. The crime, then, is not justified, but it is understood as the final collapse of someone who has been pushed to the edge. Another interesting facet is her role as a foreign woman in a foreign land. In ancient Greece, being a foreigner was already a disadvantage. Being a woman and a foreigner was a social sentence. Medea arrives in Corinth as an outsider, without roots or local support. Her identity is always at risk, her position unstable. When Jason decides to leave her, he doesn't just break a romantic bond. He leaves her completely unprotected in a society that will never fully accept her. That context adds another layer of vulnerability to her situation, and perhaps explains part of her despair. The myth of Medea has also had a constant presence in contemporary cinema and theater. From classical adaptations to modern versions, her story continues to captivate. One of the most impactful films based on her life is Medea, 1969. Directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini, with Maria Callas in the lead role. The choice of an opera singer to portray Medea is no coincidence. The film becomes an almost musical experience, where pain and fury are expressed with an intensity rarely seen on screen. Even in series like Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, or Xena, Warrior Princess, there are indirect references to her story, integrating it into the broader mythological universe. But perhaps one of the most surprising uses of her figure is in Latin American and European cinema, where her symbolism is used to speak about political betrayal, exile, domestic violence, and personal revolution. In literature, authors such as Margaret Atwood, Angela Carter, and Asia Jabbar have incorporated Median elements into their works, especially when exploring the theme of the marginalized woman who finds in violence or in words her only means of response. Even in children's and young adult literature, like Circe by Madeline Miller, similar figures echo her, showing how the myth lives on, adapting to new generations. But perhaps one of the most persistent questions remains: how can we feel empathy for a woman who kills her own children? This contradiction is precisely what makes Medea such a powerful character. She is not a simple archetype to love or hate. She is a mother who loves deeply, but who also feels that the world has taken everything from her. In her mind, killing her children is not just an act of revenge, but an extreme form of protection. If they cannot live with honor, what future awaits them? And here arises another key question. Is it possible to separate the horror of her actions from the context that caused them? Many cultures have had similar figures: mothers who kill, queens who betray, warriors who turn on their own. But few have generated as much philosophical and moral reflection as Medea. She represents the extreme of overwhelming emotion, the border between love and hate, between protection and destruction. Her legacy does not only live in books and on stages, but in every woman who faces betrayal, abandonment, or injustice. Medea is a reminder of what happens when a person, especially a woman, is pushed to the edge with nowhere to run. She is a warning, but also a wake-up call. Behind every extreme gesture, there may be a story of deep pain, invisible and silenced. Now, if we truly want to understand Medea, we must go beyond her role as a tragic or vengeful mother. We must explore who she was before she met Jason, what powers she possessed, what beliefs guided her, and how her connection with magic and the gods influenced her decisions. Because Medea was not just an ordinary woman. She was a sorceress, a chosen of the gods, a direct descendant of Helios. And that radically changes how we understand her nature. Behind Medea's figure, there is not just a wounded and vengeful woman. There is a powerful sorceress, a descendant of gods, a woman who commands dark and ancestral forces. Her connection with magic is not a decorative detail in her story, but a central element that defines who she is, how she acts, and why her actions carry so much symbolic weight. In the ancient world, where the supernatural was deeply intertwined with daily life, Medea represents a manifestation of feminine power in its purest and most terrifying form. Daughter of Aeetes, king of Colchis, and direct granddaughter of Helios, the Greek sun god, Medea was born under a magical star. Her divine lineage granted her authority and knowledge beyond the human realm. Unlike Jason, whose heroism depended on weapons and physical strength, Medea had access to ancestral wisdom, passed down perhaps by her father or by priestesses and druids of her homeland. She was an expert in medicinal herbs and poisons, capable of both healing and killing, of rejuvenating aged bodies and invoking rituals that defied the limits of nature. One of the most significant episodes of her magical use occurs when she helps Jason rejuvenate the elderly King Aeson, Jason's father. According to legend, Medea prepared a magical potion that revitalized Aeson's body, extending his life and restoring his youth. This not only demonstrates her command over life and death, but also her role as a kind of guardian of natural balance, someone who could alter the established order if she chose to. Another striking example is her intervention in the story of Pelias, the king who denied Jason his right to the throne of Iolcus. To take revenge, Medea deceived Pelias's daughters, convincing them she could rejuvenate their father through a magical ritual. She showed them how to cut up an old ram and transform it into a young lamb, using magic to prove it. The daughters, convinced, decided to apply the same procedure to their own father. But Medea did not complete the spell. Pelias died in pieces and never regained his youth, a crime as cruel as it was clever. This act, though less well known than the murder of her children, shows how capable she was of manipulating both reality and the human mind. But what does this tell us about her? That Medea did not merely use magic as a tool, she integrated it into her identity. She was a woman who understood the universe through a logic different from that of the classical Greeks, who valued reason, war, and politics. She operated in a realm where emotion, spirituality, and the dark had an equally important place. That is why, when Jason betrayed her, she did not resort to the sword or to legal complaint, options denied to a foreign woman, but to the only weapon she possessed: her intelligence, her knowledge, and her unbreakable will. Her ability to control invisible forces also set her apart from traditional Greek morality. In Euripides' tragedy, Medea does not publicly repent her acts, nor does she beg for forgiveness. At the end of the play, she appears before Jason riding a celestial chariot gifted by her grandfather Helios, carrying the bodies of her dead children. This scene is not only visually striking but also deeply symbolic. Medea is not punished by the gods. Rather, she seems to receive their support, as if she had acted within a higher cosmic order that humans cannot fully comprehend. This idea has sparked debate for centuries. Was Medea simply a mad woman thirsty for blood? Or was she a figure fulfilling a tragic destiny, guided by forces greater than herself? The answer is probably somewhere in between. Her use of magic was not just a means to an end. It was an extension of her soul, of her connection to something greater than mere mortality. Moreover, her status as a magical woman made her a dangerous being in the eyes of Greek society. In a deeply patriarchal culture, powerful women were viewed with suspicion, even fear. Medea embodied that society's worst fear. A woman who does not need any man to impose her will, who can change fate with a word, who can destroy entire families with a single decision. That is why, when Medea kills her children, she does not do it impulsively, like a mother driven mad by grief. She does it with cold determination, fully aware of what every move means. In her final monologue, she admits that she knows she is committing a terrible act, but states that she would rather cause pain than be the object of it. That phrase sums up her life philosophy: better to be the executioner than the victim. There are also those who see in this act one of extreme resistance. In a society where women had no rights, where they could be abandoned, repudiated, and forgotten, Medea took absolute control of her fate and that of her own. If she couldn't have love, family, or justice, then no one would have anything, not even her. This aspect of her personality is crucial to understanding why her legacy endures. It's not just a story of betrayal and revenge. It's a story about the abuse of power, gender oppression, violence as a response to helplessness, and the duality between love and hate. All of these forces converge in Medea, creating a character that transcends fiction to become a universal myth. But was there ever any historical basis for this figure? Although Medea is a creature of mythology, some historians have tried to find traces of her influence in ancient cultures. There are theories linking her figure to primitive maternal sacrifice rituals, shamanic practices in Eastern societies, or female figures in other pagan religions who represented both fertility and destruction. The truth is, whether real or fictional, Medea has left an indelible mark on Western culture. Every time a woman rises against injustice, when a mother makes extreme decisions to protect her children, when someone breaks societal rules to follow their own truth, Medea is there, present in some way. Although Medea is a figure from Greek mythology, her existence as a legendary character didn't arise in a vacuum. Like many other mythical figures, her story was likely nourished by real historical, cultural, and symbolic elements that, over time, merged with collective imagination to shape the archetype we know today. Is there a historical basis behind Medea? There is no conclusive evidence that Medea was a real person, but there are signs that her figure may have been inspired by powerful female figures from civilizations near Greece, especially in regions like Colchis, modern-day Georgia, where much of her story is set. This region was known to the ancient Greeks for its mysterious religious practices, its connection to shamanic rituals, and its wealth in natural resources, including medicinal herbs and poisons, which could have given rise to legends of skilled sorceresses. Some historians and folklorists have speculated that Medea might be a literary representation of priestesses or healers from local cults, whose medical and ritual knowledge made them seem almost supernatural in the eyes of foreigners. In cultures where women had more prominent roles in religion and medicine, such as in some Caucasian societies, these figures could easily become objects of fascination and fear among the Greeks, who lived in a deeply patriarchal society. Furthermore, in ancient times, the use of psychoactive and hallucinogenic plants in religious rituals was common in many mystery cults, like those of Dionysus or Demeter. The priestesses who participated in these rituals were seen as intermediaries between the human and the divine, capable of predicting the future, healing diseases, or even invoking curses. Medea may well be a poetic exaggeration of this kind of figure, a woman who, through her ability to manipulate hidden forces, becomes something more than human. Influences from other myths and cultures. Medea's story also shows parallels with legends from other civilizations, suggesting that her myth may have drawn from shared sources across Mediterranean and Eastern cultures. For instance, in Phoenician and Canaanite mythology, there is the myth of Bialtis, a mother goddess who, according to some versions, kills her children as part of a sacrificial ritual. Although this act has a different religious tone, it reflects a recurring idea in ancient cultures, that mothers could sacrifice their children as an extreme form of devotion, protection, or punishment. There are also similarities with figures like Lilith in Mesopotamian and Jewish tradition, a woman demonized for defying patriarchal order and associated with the death of small children. Although Lilith represents the dark side of femininity from a hostile perspective, she shares with Medea certain symbolic traits: the fear of the independent, intelligent, and dangerous woman. In Roman mythology, although Seneca offered a darker version of Medea, there was also influence from other figures like Proserpina, daughter of Ceres and queen of the underworld, whose transformation from innocent maiden to relentless ruler mirrors Medea's own evolution, from passionate lover to merciless avenger. The evolution of her figure through civilizations over the centuries, the image of Medea was reinterpreted by different civilizations, adapting to the values and fears of each era. In imperial Rome, where family and honor were fundamental pillars of social life, the vision of Medea became harsher. Authors like Seneca portrayed her as closer to madness and absolute evil, emphasizing her foreign and savage nature. At that time, her story was used as a moral warning. Don't trust foreign women, they implied. During the Middle Ages, when the church dominated the cultural narrative, Medea was pushed into the background. Her story didn't fit well with Christian ideals of forgiveness, female submission, and redemption. However, in Islamic and Persian texts, where the classical Greek tradition remained alive, her figure continued to be studied and analyzed, though with less dramatic emphasis. In the Renaissance, with the resurgence of interest in classical culture, Medea regained relevance. Writers like William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe borrowed elements of her personality to create complex and dangerous female characters, like Lady Macbeth or Helen of Troy. These figures showed that a woman could possess ambition, intelligence, and the will to power, even if that made her a villain in the eyes of society. During the Romantic era, Medea was reinterpreted as a tragic heroine, a woman whose passion and fury were the result of an unjust world that marginalized her. Writers like Goethe and Heine explored her duality between love and hate, between motherhood and vengeance, seeing in her an expression of both the sublime and the terrifying. In the 20th and 21st centuries, her legacy has been revisited by feminist movements, domestic violence theorists, and creators in film and contemporary literature. Today, Medea is discussed not just as a murderer, but as a victim of betrayal, cultural racism, and gender oppression. Her story is used to address issues such as parental abandonment, emotional control, and female resistance to repressive systems. What does all this tell us about Medea? That her story is not just an ancient Greek tragedy, but a living narrative that continues to evolve. Medea is a mirror reflecting how each society understands love, betrayal, violence, motherhood, and female power. She doesn't change, it is we who look at her with new eyes, finding in her new ways to empathize, to be horrified, and to understand ourselves. Behind the figure of Medea, there isn't just a vengeful woman, but a complex mind confronting extreme emotions, betrayed love, wounded pride, deep pain, and utter despair. Her psychology is not that of an irrational madwoman, but of someone who has been pushed to the limit by a system that marginalized her, a man who abandoned her, and a society that rejected her. The act of killing her children was not impulsive. It was a conscious decision, full of meaning. For Medea, her children were both an extension of herself and a reminder of her lost love with Jason. By removing them from the world, she was not only punishing her ex-husband, but also ensuring that nothing of her remained in a hostile land. Her act, though inhuman, can be seen as the final exercise of control in a life full of oppression. The question is not whether she was mad, but whether she ever had another choice. Medea's act of killing her children remains one of the most shocking and morally ambiguous moments in the history of ancient literature. For many, it is an unforgivable crime. For others, an inevitable tragedy. But what no one can deny is that it was a profoundly conscious decision, charged with psychological, emotional, and symbolic meaning. From a psychological standpoint, Medea represents the total collapse of a woman who has lost everything: her love, her home, her status, and her identity as a mother. In that process, she is not only betrayed by Jason, but also rejected by the society of Corinth, which sees her as a dangerous and unpredictable foreigner. In this context, the death of her children is not merely an act of revenge, but an extreme way of asserting control over her own life and over those she loves. Some scholars have compared her mental state to that of someone undergoing a deep, psychotic, or depressive crisis, where emotional pain overwhelms all rational or maternal instinct. However, this alone does not fully explain the coldness with which she makes her decision. Unlike someone acting without awareness, Medea reflects before killing her children, weighs the consequences, and takes full responsibility. This suggests that she did not act out of madness, but out of conviction. Another interpretation argues that Medea killed her children to spare them from future humiliation or persecution. As the children of a foreign woman accused of terrible crimes, their life in Corinth would likely have been marked by rejection, violence, and social exclusion. For her, perhaps, death was preferable to a life of constant suffering. This idea, though difficult to accept, reflects a tragic logic. If the world offers them no justice or protection, what value does life hold? Some also see this act as a form of divine punishment against Jason, a way to make him feel the same pain she felt when he abandoned her. By taking away his children, she denies him the chance of legitimate heirs, erasing his bloodline and ensuring that he will never rebuild a family. It is an absolute, cold, and calculated revenge that shows just how far love can turn into hatred when betrayed. But can there be any redemption for a mother who kills her children? That question has no simple answer. What we do know is that Medea is not a one-dimensional monster. She is a complex, intelligent, powerful, and deeply wounded woman. Her story invites us to look inward, to ask ourselves how we would react if we were pushed to the edge, if everything were taken from us, and if no door remained open before us.